Hey everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Jen Redfield. I'm going to be walking you through a year in my life that I've been keeping private. I've spent the last year dealing with a lot of health and mental health issues, and I haven't talked about it really at length. I've mentioned it a little bit on my Instagram, a little bit on my LinkedIn, and maybe mentioning it here and there on my YouTube channel, but I haven't really gone into full depth of what I've been dealing with. So, in the last year, I have been diagnosed with autism. I have found out that I am homozygous for the MTHFR gene, and most recently, I have discovered I most likely am hypermobile, which basically means I probably have Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome. All of these are interlinked. In addition to all of that, I've had severe skin issues, which I'm now linking back to a lot of these things. I want to go through each of them individually today because a lot of people haven't heard a lot of this from me, and so I thought I would just walk you through some of my symptoms, some of the treatments I've done, some of the things that I've found out about myself, as well as educate people on a lot of this. Because if you're ADHD, you may have more things, more comorbidities than just potentially autism or potentially one of these. To me, being neurodivergent, it is a spectrum. And usually when you're on the spectrum of something, you might have some other things popping up. For me, it was like I was a detective trying to put together a big puzzle and I had missing pieces. And finally, I feel like all the pieces are mostly put together, and now I feel like I'm able to actually make this video. So when I first started this channel, actually I started the channel in 2014, but I actually started posting more consistently in 2021. I really started talking a lot about my ADHD journey, which if you've seen all my videos, that was something in 2020 that was a huge realization for me. And I spent a lot of time studying the neurodivergent community and really understanding it. And in the last year, I've really, again, done a lot of stuff in my skin, and I've just really gone down the health rabbit hole as well. So all of this started probably early summer 2024. I was watching a video on TikTok, or maybe it was on Instagram, I'm not sure, where someone mentioned, and I'll leave her link below, her name is Tracy. She talked about how you can actually do a genetic test using your ancestry DNA. Now, I was very interested. I've always been super fascinated with genetics. It's something I actually did my senior film thesis on in college, and I had done my ancestry test in 2014. In fact, it was one of the first ever videos on this channel was me sharing my ancestry test results. So what do? I figure out how to download my raw DNA from Ancestry, and I upload it to this website called Genetic Genie. I've been wanting to do a video on this topic for so long. I'm probably going to do a much longer video on it, but basically these were my results. It turns out, if you see the red, that basically means really bad. Turns out that I'm homozygous for a specific gene mutation called MTHFR, which basically is, they call it the mother effer gene. It's basically my body doesn't detox well, it doesn't methylate well, and I spent basically the entire year until now researching this gene. I was so interested in it. I wanted to know everything I could. It really changed a lot of my life. It changed my diet. It changed just so many things. I spent so long trying to figure it out because this was a actual thing that I could see on my DNA that I had. It wasn't just a doctor being like, I think you have this or you have all the criteria. No, this was in my DNA that I had this genetic mutation. And so that discovery led me down a rabbit hole that lasted for several months. And about August, after doing maybe 2 or 3 months of research into this, I realized, wait, a lot of people with autism also have this mutation. In fact, I think it's like 90%. And so I was like, wait, am I autistic? It actually, I realized it one night. I was just scrolling on Instagram and I kept reading signs of autism and all this stuff. And I just had a mental breakdown. I was like, oh my gosh, is this what I'm missing? I had been really going down the ADHD rabbit hole for years. And then I'm like, but I never felt like I really fit into that community as much. There was definitely things that were different about me that I just felt like didn't always align exactly like I saw other ADHDers. And so that sent me down another rabbit hole for many months of, wait, am I autistic? Is that something that I have actually been struggling with my whole life as well? And I decided to actually go and be evaluated. I actually paid quite a bit of money to get a evaluation from a licensed therapist who does autism assessments. She's autistic herself. And just this past week, I was officially diagnosed. After 4 sessions, did multiple different questionnaires, I was officially diagnosed as autistic. This is something that I, again, have been processing for the last almost year. For some of you guys, it might be new information, but I have really accepted it for the last year, and it's something that I feel like I'm ready to talk about. It's something I don't like keeping hidden. And so for me, I really just wanted to talk about it. A lot of people don't know that you can be diagnosed with both ADHD and autism. And in fact, there's a lot of overlap, and they didn't actually realize this until 2013. So it's kind of a newer thing. And because of the advent of social media, so many more people are realizing that that is something that they have had their whole life. To me, autism is obviously a spectrum. I'm a very high masker, which basically means that I can basically look somewhat normal or neurotypical to some people. I'm able to talk, I'm able to have social interactions, but there's definitely been some things in my life that have been hard for me. In fact, growing up, it was very hard for me to make friends. It was something that I really struggled with much of my adolescent years and up through college. When I was in my 20s, I definitely spent a lot of time working on my social skills, and that has really helped me. But there's so many parts of autism that I think is really interesting. To me, it's how your brain is wired to think. It's the way that I process and think about things. It's the way that a lot of the things that I do, I've had to learn and teach myself because they didn't come naturally. And that's probably the biggest thing that is why I even called this podcast the Optimization Toolbox. I'm trying to figure out the tools that I can use to improve my life. And that's actually something that my therapist said on the evaluation. She's like, you have been so focused on fixing and finding solutions, which is actually an autistic trait. And I was like, oh, good to know. I had no idea. So there are so many things about me that I get very intense about, very deeply digging into, to the point where I basically get to the bare bones of whatever the topic is that I'm super interested in. Special interest is a topic within the autistic community that's very common. It's very hard for me to talk about things that I'm not interested in. Interest-based just learning is also very common in the ADHD community. So I've just know my whole life that has been part of me is I can get hyper focused on certain things. And that's something that's just how I have always functioned. Going into 2024, I realized I had this gene mutation. I had potentially autism and just was recently confirmed with autism. And then I was also at the same time, parallel with this, going through a lot of physical issues with my body. I'll kind of start at the beginning. I've done a few videos about my skincare journey, but I haven't done any in a while, and it's actually gotten worse and better over the last couple years. So when I was in high school, I had really severe acne. I'll show you guys some pictures here, but it was really bad. And I went to, I think, 3 or 4 different dermatologists with my mom. We tried everything. And finally, they're like, here's your 2 options, Accutane or birth control. And at the time I'd read about Accutane, it sounded really scary. So I was like, I guess I'll go with birth control. So I was put on that at about 18. And then every year I'd go to the gynecologist and be like, do I still need to be on birth control for the acne and to just regulate my cycle? And she's like, oh, that's fine, just stay on it. And I was like, okay. So it got to about age 30 and I started to really be like, wait, why am I still on this? I feel like I started learning a lot about the natural options and just how birth control can be really bad for you. And I was just like, I don't think I want to do this anymore. So I decided to stop taking it. I read a book called Beyond the Pill, which I highly recommend. And I decided to stop my birth control. I knew there could be some ramifications of this. Didn't realize how much it would be, but I decided, so this was, I think it was 2022, I believe, either 2022 or 2023, I decided to go off birth control to just be a normal person, not get my normal cycle back. And what happened was, over the course of about a year, my back and chest really started to get really bad acne. I'll show you guys a before and after picture of this is what I look like before. And trigger warning, if you don't like seeing acne, please just skip the next 30 seconds. This is what it looked like after. And then here's a few other shots. I've been documenting my back this was probably 2023 all the way through this year. I think that most of this was actually last year in 2024. I was miserable. I was absolutely miserable. I couldn't wear low-cut shirts. It was actually painful. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to go back on any medications. I knew that I could fix this. There was a core reason for this to happen. I really went down the holistic health rabbit hole, and I ended up hiring a naturopath, which I had never worked with before. I randomly met her at a networking event, and we met up. I did a few different tests. I did some blood tests as well as a Dutch test, which is a hormone test. And what I learned from the blood test was that I had low vitamin D, which I guess living in Minnesota makes sense. And we'll kind of get to that in the future as we talk about some of the other stuff going on with my skin. But the other one was I had high androgen levels. So basically she set me up on a supplement plan, started taking those supplements. And I will say it has improved. It has gotten better. But it hasn't improved as fast as I had hoped. And I felt like there was just something else missing. I was like, why have I always had acne issues? Why is there... I had acne even before starting on birth control, so it can't just be the post-birth control stuff. There has to be another thing behind this. And in the last 2 weeks, I found out another comorbidity of autism, MTHFR, ADHD. And that is something called hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos Syndrome, which basically means my body doesn't produce collagen correctly, and it affects every single joint and every single part of my body. I could go into it and do an entire video, but I don't want to, again, I want to do videos on each of these things. I wanted to make this video and this podcast to just walk through each of these things. But was probably the biggest aha moment for me, was realizing I was hypermobile, because it explained so many things about my body. The fact that I'm so pale, the fact that I have really long fingers, the fact that just everything. I can make a list. It's insane. But what that meant was that my skin actually took a really long time to heal because there was so much issues with collagen. And so now that I know that, I feel like I have some more answers. Unfortunately, with all of these conditions, these are lifelong. There are no meds for the most part. There's no treatments as much. They're just like, you have to deal with them and find solutions because they're not curable. They are literally just part of your DNA and part of who you are. I can obviously make better choices with my diet, with my skincare, with the exercises that I do to improve my life. Obviously, I will hopefully live a full life. There's no short-term life expectancy for any of these. It's just you're going to live a different life. And it's been a lot. The last year has been a lot. And learning all these things is important, and it's been really valuable to learn, but it's also been hard. Being autistic is hard. Having skin issues is hard. Having pain all the time is hard. And I don't want this to be oh, poor Jenna, she is struggling. I want this to be educational. I want this to be helpful to people that maybe are going through something similar. Maybe they're like, wait, maybe I have this too. A lot of it was because of other people talking on the internet about this. That is how I learned about all these conditions. If people hadn't brought them up and talked about how interrelated they are, I would have never ever looked into it, and I would have still been wondering another 10 years from now. Finding all this out within a year span has been a lot to process, but I feel like I have developed a lot of amazing tools. I actually have an MTHFR guide that I created. I'm creating one for Ehlers-Danlos and just hypermobility in general. I have not been officially diagnosed with that one, but I'm like, of course I have that. I just can see it in just everything I've seen. I have to get an evaluation, but it's just like, I just knew immediately how I knew I was autistic and I knew I was ADHD. It was just like, I had this intuitive feeling that this is what I had. And it obviously takes another person to just be like, yep, you got that. But for me, the fact that all these are interlinked, especially with the MTHFR as well, that just was like proof in the pudding of I have genetic mutations that have caused this, and they all are interlinked, and I have been looking for these answers my whole life. I had never ever heard of some of these things. The MTHFR and Ehlers-Danlos, I hadn't really heard of them. I didn't really know what they were. They're not super commonly talked about. I had to dig into the communities and really understand that they're rare, but not as rare as you'd think. I read a stat yesterday that they think that 10% of the population is hypermobile. I was like, whoa, that is a lot more than I expected. 30% of people have the MTHFR gene. So it's not like it's super uncommon, but it is something that a lot of people just don't know about. So my goal with my YouTube channel has always been to educate people about whatever it is that I'm interested in that might also affect other people. And for me, making this video and making this kind of short episode of a podcast just to let you guys know what I've been dealing with the last year has been very helpful for me to feel like this isn't just a private thing I've been going through. Obviously, this is going to be a short episode, a short video, because there's so much to unpack. And if I had to, I would do an hour-long video on each of these topics. But I just wanted to share this with you guys today because I have been keeping all this inside and I have been keeping it all in. When it comes to my skin, I still haven't gotten to a place where I feel like I'm healed. So I'm not going to make a skincare video until that has happened. So I was hoping this summer I could make one, but unfortunately it might be longer than that. When it comes to my autism journey, I feel like I want to do an in-depth video about the entire system and the entire process of getting diagnosed, of my symptoms and all the things that I've either helped myself with or have just learned. With the MTHFR, I want to do an entire episode on that, how I went gluten-free, how I've changed my diet, how I have learned so much about the supplements to take for that, and some of the tools that I've used for that. And then finally with Ehlers-Danlos, I really think that this is something that I'm brand new to, so I don't have enough information yet to make a video. Maybe by the end of the year, I will have a lot more information and I will have some, I guess, results or some beneficial things that I've gotten from potentially physical therapy or other tools I've purchased to help deal with pain, to deal with my posture, which is probably the biggest thing I want to work on this year when it comes to that. A lot of people may not know this, but I've had really bad posture my whole life. In fact, I have gone to posture specialists and I have gone to a chiropractor my whole life. And I just felt like it was my fault that I wasn't strong enough. But now I'm realizing, no, it's because I have a genetic condition that actually makes it hard for me to be able to have good posture. And I actually need to work on it in a different way, which is actually really validating. So this was just kind of a video I wanted to make and a Substack article to write because it is something that I have been privately struggling with the last year. And I finally wanted to share everything with those who really care and want to know. If you have any questions or thoughts, I would love to have you leave a comment on my YouTube video or on my Substack post because I know there's a lot of people in the neurodivergent community who watch my content, and I know that this is kind of a bigger step forward into that community and walking through all the things that I feel like have been something, again, I'm just learning for the first time about myself. These are things that I've had my whole life, so it doesn't change who I am as a person. It just gives me the language that I need to be able to help myself. And I think that's the biggest blessing and realization I've had is I could have been in the dark if I didn't really go down the rabbit hole and figure out something else is wrong with me. This isn't enough. ADHD is not enough. That's not the end of the journey. It was actually just the beginning of the journey. And I think now that I know all of this stuff, I feel like I can actually talk about it and I can actually help people that are also going through this or are on these journeys as well to really show you what I've learned in future videos because they are very important to me and it's something that I have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So they're definitely going to be in my videos moving forward. Thank you so much for watching and listening. If you haven't subscribed to my Substack, I send out emails every week with updates. I'm obviously going to be talking more about some of these conditions and a little bit more about my tools that I've used to help, but also really going back to my digital organization and Notion and all the stuff that I love to teach that is still going to be part of it. So thank you guys for watching and listening, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye!